So I think Dawna is going to talk about culture, complexity. It's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Erwin. It's also because we just learn from each other, so it's been a long period of time doing the change work, but it's just been fun because you learn from everything and everyone. My interest in culture change came in my role as a professional facilitator, and in the sense that I moved from different organizations, communities, and what I started to see was some patterns and some very interesting patterns. One of them would be that an organization would try to implement change, and it would move forward, but then it would inexplicably roll back. And maybe not to exactly the same point it was when the well-intentioned change was put forward, but certainly it moved back a little bit closer. So all to say that it wasn't fast enough. Things were moving, but they were, and I wanted to know why. That was, how many of you have seen that pattern in your work? Here and there. Okay. Second thing I've noticed is that problems kept recycling. So people would go in, or consultants, or even internally, they'd go to solve a problem, and the thing would show up again. It would show up maybe in a different form, but it was still the same problem rolling around. And I thought, there's something going on here that we don't understand. And eventually I came to realize that because we're now working in very complex environments, simple causal thinking, the thing that works really well when you're fixing buckets, the holes in the bucket, the water's on the floor, we fix it by plugging the hole, don't work in complex environments. So we had to change our thinking, and there was something about that I found intriguing, because the obvious question is how, and what is the process that we can use to accelerate how we do things. The third thing, and there's obviously more, but the third one for today is that innovation, any attempts that I saw in organizations for innovation, would be only able to go as far as it was innovation as long as you didn't do anything unexpected. So if you did something unexpected, then there would be some pushback. And it would look like it was coming from the senior echelons, the executives, the managers who are looking at you and going, well, you're not doing what we thought you would do. You're doing something different. Well, yeah, but you asked me to innovate. Well, yeah, but that was as long as you didn't do anything too different. So, but these conversations were happening at a place, and they were completely missing that there was a fundamental belief structure in the organization that were pulling it back. And I'm very curious about that. So the three mistakes that we'll look at today. And we'll start by looking at what do we mean by culture, because I'm sure that there's many definitions of that, but for the next 15 or 20 minutes, this is the one that we'll work with. And I like this one because it makes it pretty clear. I'm sure all of you have used in your own conversations the iceberg approach. It means simply that the results, the stuff that's on the surface is real easy to see. Those are the metrics, the things that we can visibly measure. And I remember asking at one forum a bank if they were going to start measuring intuitive decision making, and when they said yes, I got scared, because there are some things you just don't want to measure, and those things would be one of them. But as you go down into the organization, you see that you gain greater leverage by going to the belief structures at the bottom. Now, those belief structures are the ones that were there when the company was first formed. They're the ones that consciously, when you build a company, you know what you care about, and you know what's important to you, and what you're thinking about gets embedded into everything you do. And then once you get going, you forget about all that, and that's what starts running the show. So obviously, it works the same for us biologically, by the way, which is intriguing. So if you have a situation where you've got things in your personal life that aren't showing up the way you think they should, it's the belief structures always that need to be re-examined and tossed up and taken a look at. So there are temptations in organizational change to focus on behaviors, and I'll get into that as part of this series of goofs that we have running rampant. But the other signals are that there are just disconnects. Perhaps it's team performance and what's being expected. There's just a lot of signals that you can see in organizations that tell you there's something that's not in sync. So mistake number one, failing to manage corporate culture. One of the interesting things about being in environments of high complexity, first of all, we have to remember we live on a planet that's a mature, complex ecosystem. By definition, that means that we are working in a complex system overall. That we're living on the planet, therefore we're an expression of those environments. And so one small interruption into the system has a ripple effect quite quickly. And you see that for good or bad, when anytime something happens in an organization, you'll watch it go through very quickly. So the first mistake then is failing to manage the culture, and there's a reason for that. Mention that to many people, and people I know who know about culture, and their eyes glaze over, they begin to sink down into the seats, and they look for perhaps chocolate or something, because it's a big thing. How do you start with this? What do you do with it? And so it's a natural thing to not try to pay attention to it, and yet it's the very thing that when you do pay attention to it, it makes all the difference. Size matters. Smaller than 200, it's much easier to make adjustments. Greater than 200, you have to build an approach that I'm going to suggest today. So, one of the easy things you can do in companies or in yourself, this is an applicable strategy across the board, is to notice what the patterns are, because underneath every pattern is a belief system, and when you ask why long enough, you'll find the belief. And I'll give you, for example, that led to the belief that's on this slide. I was at a networking event talking to a young woman who was there for 3 months, top of the regional sales team, doing phenomenally well, and she was looking for her next job. 3 months, and she's looking for her next job. I said, why? She said, well, because the pattern this organization has is they fire anybody that has a bad month. She says, there's going to be a time when I'm going to have a bad month. I'm going to be out in a heartbeat. I'm not looking for that kind of company. So this company, if you dig down, its basic core belief was the employees are replaceable. We can get new ones. I'm sure nobody did the math on how much that cost, because if they did, they would probably rethink that belief. But nevertheless, that's what's going on. And it's going on unnoticed. And this is where consciousness comes in. Mistake number 2 is trying to fix behaviors, trying to change behaviors and fix them. I worked in one organization where if there was a conflict between managers and supervisors and the staff, they sent the staff off for training because there must have been something wrong with them, so if you send them off, they'll fix it. But it also shows up in the conversation around how we direct, control, and tell people what to do, which all of our speakers today have done a really good job of laying the whole backdrop for how that evolved. But here we are in a place where we can look at it and say, well, is that still useful? You know, do we stick with that or not? And of course, ethical breaches show up because the container, the cultural belief structure, the beliefs are out of sync with what is going, like it's the parts of the whole conversation. So, and then watch the blame game and you know right away that they're blaming behaviors. They're not digging down and finding out what created the situation in the first place. So management, we've talked a little bit about management in the course of the evening and the afternoon or whatever time zone you're in. We've talked about that, but what we do know that between management as command control and no managers at all, and there are, of course, some organizations that do very well without that because these leaders operate at all levels. There is a place called, what do we do with the person who's still in the management role, who still is strongly convinced that their identity is based on directing and controlling and others? Well, there's a place, the role that the manager can play in this transition that we are moving through right now is to shift their role from controlling to supporting performance. There are no shortages of blocks in the way of teams that want to do great things. And the role of the manager to get rid of those blocks, help their teams, is huge. It's also much more fulfilling than meeting metrics. It's a very different role, and it's impossible to control a networked world. I'm sure you've tried controlling something on Facebook before. It's impossible, unless you're actually behind the scenes and doing that. So this is the opportunity that managers have, is to release control and gain personal fulfillment and performance power, which brings me to this tweet away thing. Do you see that? All right, this is my great invention for tonight. This was a combination of a tweet and a takeaway. So it's called a tweet away. I'm kind of hoping it catches on. Do you like that? Well, we'll see. Mistake number 3, underestimating the power of human spirit. The reason why this gets overlooked, I think, is because we still believe that we cannot tackle the big issues. And there are very few employees, very few people on this planet that have not noticed we've got some big issues in front of us. We've got 7 billion people, we've got food security questions, we've got energy resiliency questions, all of which can be addressed by using nature's principles. We also have the understanding that our planet is in peril. We're living on borrowed time, just like credit cards. We've drawn down on that line of credit. And so the understanding the part of the human spirit is that in environments of complexity, creativity and complexity go together. There's a huge force of creativity. Much of it's in younger people, but it's also being driven right across the board. So if we have any organizations with stress-related illness, with depression, with any of those kinds of things, they're indicators that the company's just not using that creativity at all. In fact, they're pushing it down. So that's another signal that we've got huge opportunities in front of us. So people are aware of the fact we've got these issues sitting behind us, and they want to make a difference. And it's not going to be, it can be in a small way, but it is going to be making a difference. So this is very exciting because I think what it means is that business has a much higher level of leadership to play, a greater opportunity to play. Now, if we turn to the planet and we say, gee, you've been in business for 3.8 billion years, and you've managed complex ecosystems very well for that long length of time until humanity showed up, what can we learn? Well, we can learn a bunch of stuff from some companies that have actually figured this out. And earlier today, I think, Niels, you mentioned Southwest Airlines as one of your cultural examples. Southwest Airlines is one of the younger companies it is the youngest company in a portfolio run by a colleague of mine called Joseph J. Bragdon, who wrote a book called Profit for Life. And I came across Jay when I was doing my intuitive exploration of how can we do much better than we're doing, much faster than we currently are doing it. And he put together this LAMP index, 60 companies worldwide. All of them were selected for core values of care and compassion for nature and natural resources, as well as people. In other words, the employees, the communities, the clients. So it's a holistic perspective, very wide perspective. All of these companies also are in business to be of service. They are making money, being profitable, is not their number one reason for existing. They're existing for a much higher calling. And they're also obviously driven by value creation. The bucks come out, support it. Financial security supports it. So any of you that have lived through periods of financial trying times know that it's nice that you don't have to worry about that. That's how these companies operate. So let's take a closer look at what those attributes of a living system are. These companies know they're part of a living system. They're not pretending they're outside of it. They know they're part of a living system. They're high-performance networks. They're very, very networked, deeply networked. Oh, my goodness. Okay, thank you. Decentralized decision-making, and they share common goals. They're also frugal with resources, which creates that financial security, and they're self-organizing. Here's your next tweet away. Companies that operate by nature's principles are highly conscious, both intuitively and intellectually. And these are Jay's slides, by the way. Take a look at this one quickly. Novo Nordisk. See, I don't know what happened with those words there. Pretend that's not there. But Novo Nordisk. Now, when you stare at this, what's your first instinct? The big graph says what? Is it the traditionally managed company that's on the left? How many think so? Yes. Okay, interesting. It's important that we observe our patterns of thinking in any of these kinds of conversations. The bar on the left is Novo Nordisk, 4,000% return on investment over 20 years. The two companies on the right are more traditionally managed. They are in business, the two companies on the right are in business to make money. The company on the left, Novo Nordisk, is in business for higher service. There are 60 companies like this worldwide. I think we can learn something from this. This is Canon. This is Canon. Its higher purpose is to offer greater value through less resources. This is Nucor, model of decentralization and deep networking. This company has no R&D resources because their front line is the R&D. So the next tweet away is that the same principles nature uses to keep a complex system stable we can use to dynamically adapt business cultures. How? And I have to thank the people in Tallinn, Estonia, who came to my sessions, because I learned a lot from them. When employees spot patterns that are in their way, they can know exactly what it is to remove them. They know. If I ask people on a plane, which I've done, what would you take away? They say performance appraisals. And what else would you take away? Quarterly reports. Interesting. Or how about on the political scale, 4-year election processes, so we can have this longer view. We're looking for balance between the short term and the long term. It's not either or conversations anymore. It's the balance between the two. So if you've got a group of employees who can see a pattern and they self-organize to clear that pattern out, they can have a lot of fun with this. There's a bunch of deep transformational tools like storytelling that Erwin does, and hacking, which Stefan Haas does. Stefan Haas in Germany does. So, and all of that works towards iteratively and creatively and constantly adapting this very complex environment. So these are using your networks. You've got them, might as well use them. It does demand a higher level of leadership skills, a more sophisticated set of skills, and it does have you understand that conflicts and collisions lead to expanded consciousness. So if you think conflict is bad, look again. It's only bad in how it's used. It's very useful if you can take it and expand things with it. And finally, the balance between rational and intuitive. So what are we truly capable of when we replace force and struggle, which we've been relying on for a considerable length of time, with intelligence and creativity? I think the formula is simple. You add the power of the human spirit with the guidance of a higher purpose, with the capacity to self-organize in networks, and you can get phenomenal performance, but you can get much more than that. You can get radical innovation unlike we've ever seen before, and we need it, no question. So I truly believe that this is an opportunity that is worthy of collaboration. I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.